Testing, 1, 2.
Check 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Checking, checking, checking.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Transportation Committee meeting. I'd like to start off the meeting by, first of all, thanking our Public Works people who are out here today on a very sloppy, icy day. And the reports that I've heard so far have been that the roads are quite good, the sidewalks are quite good. It was a challenging weather event with the freezing rain coming starting around 6 this morning, so I just want to thank all the people out there in the plows and the trucks and the sanders and salters and everything else for the work that they're doing, and I know that the residents appreciate it. Secondly, another matter that's not on the agenda, but I thought I would bring to everybody's attention, it's Councillor Moffat's birthday today. So thought I'd mention that. Not going to ask anybody to sing or anything, but happy birthday, Scott.
It's young on this side of the table. Let him move the old
So George brings wisdom to the table. So no regrets today, no declarations of interest. If we could have confirmation in the minutes of December the 2nd, 2015.
Carried.
Thank you. Communications as noted in the agenda. I'm going to go through the agenda now. First, we have the Ministry of Transportation who will be giving us a presentation on the Highway 417 noise retrofits, traffic management plan and staging. We'll be holding that because we have a presentation. Next, we will be having status update on Transportation Committee inquiries and motions for period ending January 22nd, 2016. The staff was given direction on December the 2nd regarding a question around road tolls and the feasibility of carrying out a study and review. Councillor Chernyshenko brought forward that direction, and staff are not quite finished with that, so it will be coming forward in March. And I believe that Councillor Chernyshenko is fine with that. Next, we have, so can we receive this report for information?
Received.
Next, we have the semi-annual performance report to Council Q2 2015 and Q3 2015.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for that.
Okay, we'll hold that. Number 4 is the 2016 Parking Services Business Plan, and I understand the Councillor Foyer will be bringing a motion on that, so we'll hold that as well. Number 5 is the Traffic, Pedestrian and Road Safety Enhancements report, and staff has a brief presentation on that, so we'll hold that as well. Number 6 on the list is the airport parking directional signs, and we have a delegation to speak to that, so we'll be holding that matter as well. Then we have a councillor's item brought on by Councillor Harder, who unfortunately can't be here today, but it's the Greenbank Road speed reduction. I know she canvassed all the committee members in advance of the meeting, so can we carry that matter? Okay, thank you. And again, the information previously distributed, this is noted in the agenda. So we'll go back to number 1 on the agenda, which is the Ministry of Transportation presentation. And we have Lincoln McDonald and from the MMMM group, and David Linden-Smith from MTO, who will be making the presentation. Good morning, gentlemen.
Thank you very much for making time for us on the agenda this morning. I'm going to give over to Lincoln in a second, but the purpose of our presentation is to talk about the traffic management plan for a project for construction of noise barriers at various locations, retrofit noise barriers in the downtown. area. We've been meeting with city traffic staff throughout the process and wanted to make the presentation of the traffic management to the committee. So with that, I'll hand it over to Lincoln McDonald from MMM.
Thank you again for giving us the opportunity to present this little presentation to explain the project. The scope of work is the installation and retrofit of a new 5-meter noise wall. Includes the installation of traffic control devices to manage the work zones, removal and reconstruction of existing barrier walls, installation of new noise panels, installation of new ground-mounted barrier and 5-meter noise walls, modifications of existing advanced traffic management systems, lighting modifications as required, recurring nightly ramp closures, some longer-term ramp closures, nighttime and daytime lane reductions on Highway 417, and nighttime lane reductions on city streets for overhead work. So just to give you some information on prior consultation, we met with city staff on October 28th, 2015. We met with the Transportation Incident Management Group approximately 2 weeks ago on January the 27th, and we had a public involvement center on the January the 20th. And to give you a little bit of background, these operational improvements were included as part of the Transportation Environmental Study Report completed for 417 from 416 to Anderson Road, and it received EA clearance in 2008. So this is just a key plan showing the various locations. So for noise wall 1, which is located on the south side of the eastbound lanes at Preston Street and the off-ramp. We'll have recurring nightly closures on Rochester Street eastbound off-ramp and one Highway 417 eastbound lane. There will be no impacts during the day. The Rochester ramp traffic will utilize the Carling Avenue eastbound off-ramp as an alternate exit. Intersections along the alternate route were analyzed from a traffic perspective and no concerns were identified. And the approximate duration for construction for this wall is 4 to 6 weeks. Wall 3A and 3B are located on the north side of the westbound lanes from Bronson to Lyon. The full-time closure of the Lyon Street westbound on-ramp and Bronson Street westbound off-ramp will be required. There will be no lane closures on Highway 417 westbound. Lyon Street ramp traffic will be directed to use the Bronson westbound on-ramp via Catherine Street. Bronson westbound off-ramp traffic will be directed to use the Metcalfe Street westbound off-ramp and the Catherine Street westbound. We will require police traffic control during the afternoon peak hours between 3 and 6 at Bronson Avenue and Catherine Street and Percy Avenue. And the duration for these two walls is approximately 2 months. Wall 3C is located on the north side of the westbound lanes. It's located between the O'Connor and Lyon Street on-ramps. We will require nighttime recurring full closure of the O'Connor westbound on-ramp and one lane of Highway 417 westbound between O'Connor and Bronson. There will be no impacts to the 417 eastbound ramps or city streets during the day, and ramp traffic will be directed to Lyon Street westbound on-ramp and the Bronson westbound on-ramp. And construction for this is approximately 4 weeks. Wall 4 and 5 are located on the south side of the eastbound 417, approximately Kent Street to Bank. There will be recurring nightly closures on Metcalfe Street eastbound off-ramp from Highway 417 eastbound lanes, reduced to one lane between Kent and Elgin. Isabella Street will be reduced to a single lane at night between Bank and O'Connor. Lane reductions at night on Bank Street, O'Connor, and Metcalfe Street were required for the overhead work of installing the noise barrier on the overhead structures. No impacts during the day on Highway 417 eastbound ramps or city streets. Metcalfe Street eastbound off-ramp traffic will be directed to use the Bronson Avenue and Kent Street eastbound off-ramps. Intersections along the alternate routes were analyzed and no concerns were identified. And the approximate duration for these two walls is 2 to 3 months. Wall 6 is located east of Bank Street. It will be a full-time closure of one of the 2 lanes on the Metcalfe Street eastbound on-ramp. The lane redesignation on Isabel Street were required to retain the double left northbound on Metcalf and eliminate one lane on the eastbound on-ramp. Lane reductions at night on Elgin Street for overhead work on the structure. No impacts to Highway 417 eastbound during the day or night. And again, police traffic control for this wall has been identified as being required for the afternoon peak between 3 and 6 for Isabella and the eastbound Metcalf on-ramp intersection, Isabella and O'Connor Street, and Catherine Street and O'Connor Street. And the approximate duration for this is 2.5 to 3 months. So if you have any questions, feel free to answer them.
Thanks for the presentation, and Councillor Fleury is first on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Every time the MTO comes, I ask the same question. I've been very disappointed with the glass that we've put on the 417. I was told that they were going to be self-cleaning, which I haven't found a window that's self-cleaning. So I'm curious to see what materials are planned here, because there are great materials that are up, that are concrete. The ones that you've put close to the Lees overpass, wonderful. The ones that you've put over the Saint Laurent corridor, you look today, it looks awful, and it's really unfortunate. So I want to make sure that these materials don't replicate themselves throughout the corridor, or else I'll become a parent of the era that we've done these works.
The transparent acrylic panels that will be used at certain installations on these barrier walls are a standard noise wall product. They're engineered to obviously mitigate noise, and that's what we've been using elsewhere in the province, and that's what we propose to use in the areas on this project that require clear panels. My understanding is they are engineered to be self-cleaning by the manufacturers, and that's what we've been using province-wide where we need clear panels.
I hope that Ottawa can be different, so I wonder if we're able to reconsider that material. I mean, the idea is just as a noise barrier. What's the matter if it's not visible through? There's no one that stops on the 417 and enjoys that view. You're supposed to be focused on the road. So I really question the desire to use that material. We have other materials that could be in place, and they're not as visually impacted. I'll tell you what, if there was a self-cleaning product, we'd use them in windows across the country. That is not the case. People have to get their windows clean every year. So, you know, is it an easy cleanable material? It is, but I don't see anyone going out and cleaning it. So it looks, you know, every time there's a truck that throws some salt on it, it appears and it shows. It's disgusting, and I don't know why we use it. So, you know, I don't know what mechanism we have at committee today to ask you to use a different material.
Those panels, so I'm not sure what other avenues we would have open to us.
I'll do a quick follow-up question, I guess. You referenced you have a number of different acrylics. Are there not other materials that you could use other than acrylic, I think is what Councillor Fleury is getting to?
I can double-check with our expert staff in Toronto, but I don't believe so.
Okay, well, if you could do that and then get back to the relevant contact person in the city so we can share that with committee members, that would be appreciated. Thank you. I don't know. Councillor Deans was wondering whether you have a visual of what the barrier will look like.
We do, but we don't have it with us as part of the presentation. That's certainly something we could send along within the next day or two. The concrete panels will look very similar to the ones that were recently installed in the vicinity of Robinson Avenue, and we do have some material on the website as part of our PIC displays that show what the clear panels would look like, but we could certainly pass that along as well.
That would be appreciated. Councillor Caudry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just coming back to Councillor Fleury's question, in terms of the absorption, noise absorption that you mentioned with the clear panel versus the cement panel, has there been a study done to see one is better than the other? Is that the reason why we're using acrylic panels?
My understanding is they're equivalent in terms of they're equivalent in terms of noise attenuation. The acrylic is lighter, which comes into play at bridges, and it does offer the opportunity for clear sections to break up the wall and to provide views at certain points, for instances, crossing roads.
And from a Highway Traffic Act perspective, does that become a distraction to the driver in terms of looking towards those panels to see what views are available? Has that been tested?
We've used them elsewhere in the province. And,
Your microphone.
we've used them elsewhere in the province, and I'm not aware of any issues to that effect.
So you have looked at it, and you're comfortable that there is no effect from a distracted driving point of view?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of cost, what is the differential in cost between the acrylic panels and the cement wall?
The acrylic panels are more expensive. I'm not certain exactly how much.
Could we, Mr. Chair, ask for some of that information, background information, through the report coming forward? Is that possible?
Well, I don't know that there's a report coming forward, but there's...
No, but I mean, they just mentioned that they would come back with some information.
Yeah, so for a list, I think we've asked for a link that will show visually what this is going to look like, also what the other material alternatives are, and I guess you can add to that what the cost differential.
Right, and the noise attenuation differential, if there is one.
What in other words, how effective each material is.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. You said you get it to us in a couple of days. The list is getting longer, so maybe you need to adjust your time. I don't know. I'm just giving you the opportunity if you need to adjust the timeline.
I think most of those are fairly easy to follow up, and we'll try and have something in the next few days.
Okay. On the timeline, is there a timeline? I know you've given some various timelines on different sections of the wall, but when is the start time, and how much of that start time will be affected by weather conditions and stuff? Have you built that into the timelines?
We're working toward being able to try and do a couple of the locations with other work that we have going later this summer. For the remainder of the locations, we're continuing through detailed design, and we also have a detailed design commencing for replacements and rehabilitation for some of the bridges in the area. So that'll influence the timing for other sections of the wall.
So any kind of a time frame in terms of start time on even sections of the wall that you know you're rehabilitating, as an example?
We're trying to do a couple of locations which aren't influenced by structures this summer, and the remainder will be will be influenced by timing of bridge replacements from Bronson Easterly, which we're starting detailed design for this spring.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McKinney.
Thank you, Chair. So just for the record, I actually like the acrylic. I think that I just wanted to go on record. But it would be interesting to see, what the attenuation is. But I think that it gives, for residents, some more sunlight or some more, feeling of air and space. That's my...
Then it's a cleaning issue for the material.
That's right. For you, it's a cleaning issue. I wonder why there is no, and I'm asking here, why there is no proposal for sound attenuation between Elgin and Kent on the north side. It's a part of the Queensway that runs through the downtown. I know at one time the ministry had recommended against it because of the lack of residences, but we have a lot more. We've got Beaver Barracks there now. We've got a lot of people who live much closer to the Queensway in that corridor. So I just ask you that why we're not putting anything in on the north side for residents who live in the downtown.
The ministry has relatively recently completed a retrofit noise study for that area for many of the reasons that you've put forward. And a noise barrier retrofit site will be added to our retrofit list when the list is republished in the spring of this year. The approximate limits would be Metcalfe Street to Kent, nominally. Although it would be put on the retrofit list, there's currently no timing associated with when that might be constructed, and essentially it will go on a priority list with other sites in the project for construction.
And will the timing be dependent on the priority that it's given in terms of the number of residents who are affected?
Yes, number of people deriving a benefit, cost, and other factors. It is a priority tool, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Well, thank you very much, and we look forward to the answers to those questions.
Thank you very much.
The next item was held by Councillor Fleury, and that's the semi-annual performance report to Council Q2 2015, Q3 2015. And I believe Councillor Fleury there's no presentation, but Councillor Fleury had a question for staff.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question relates to...
Sorry, Councillor. I just jumped ahead a little bit. So for the last presentation and report received?
Received.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, my question relates to the benchmarking goals that are identified. I wonder, I could not find the mechanism of reporting on that benchmarking initiative. I think it's a good idea to use an existing tool and a comparator, but I don't know, it wasn't clear to me how often that would come back to committee. It's respect to currently the reporting on the semi-annual basis. We're saying that, to my understanding, we're going to use the, is it the national or provincial benchmark, other municipality benchmarking tools. And I was curious to see, I'm fine that we use that mechanism, but I wonder what reporting measures are in place for it.
I think Steve Box is going to answer the question.
Through the chair. In addition to the what you're referring to as OMBI, which is morphing into a national benchmarking organization, with the membership of Calgary and Montreal and Winnipeg, et cetera. There's also a series, there are over 32 reports that come up through standing committees reporting on performance within departments under the standing committee's mandates. And of course, we would continue to report out on the term of council priorities through the semi-annual performance report.
Okay, received? Oh, yeah, and Councillor Kakish.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question to staff in terms of how we used to do it before and with the new framework now. Is there anything that is being missed with the new reporting mechanism that we're adopting here?
The information in the semi-annual performance report is largely operational in nature, and that data will continue to be collected, analyzed, and used in making operational decisions by management that oversees operations. In terms of what information would be missed, I don't think information will be missed. It'll be more a matter of time lags with respect to information coming up through standing committees. For example, you're getting reports out on fleet services or paramedic services. In some instances, there are annual reports from those service areas that come up to committee. So rather than getting it on a semi-annual basis, you'd be receiving information about that departmental operations on an annual basis.
Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Any other questions? Okay, can we receive this?
Received.
Thank you. Next is number 4, which is the 2016 Parking Services Business Plan, which Councillor Fleury held, and he has a motion to introduce and I believe to be voted on today as well.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just before we go there, Clerk, do we need to waive the rules to bring the motion on and have it voted on all in the same meeting?
Chair, no, this is part of the item up on the agenda, so it doesn't need, it's a motion connected to the actual item, so we don't need to waive rules.
Okay, perfect. So I'll ask you to introduce the motion, Councillor Fleury, and I believe that it has staff support as well. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this relates to the efforts of our staff. They've done an amazing job in trying to balance the needs of all users, and they're limited by different jurisdictional issues. So we know that other municipalities in Ontario have adhered to different authorities in terms of parking that would enable different revenue generation. I don't want to go there, but I'd like our staff to do the analysis and see what's the best model to manage the municipal parking program. So the therefore be it resolved goes as follow. That staff be directed to explore alternative governance models for the municipal parking management program and the potential opportunities and drawbacks for each as part of the overall update to the municipal parking management strategy. Alors, l'on demande au personnel d'étudier différents modèles de gouvernance pour le programme municipal de gestion du stationnement, de même que les avantages et inconvénients de chacun de ces modèles dans le cadre de la mise à jour de la stratégie municipale de gestion du stationnement.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions or comments on the motion? Carried? Okay, thank you. Next item is number 5, the traffic pedestrian. Oh, I'm sorry. And can we carry the report as amended? It's a wonder what chairs would do without the clerks. Question on item number 5? Yes. Well, we're going to actually have a presentation on number 5. So I'm going to ask Phil Landry is going to give us about a 10-minute PowerPoint on where we are, and then we'll open it up to questions to staff.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Beside me, to my left, is Krista Tanaka. She's the Program Manager of Road Safety and Traffic Investigations. And so today I'm going to be giving an update on the Traffic, Pedestrian, and Road Safety Enhancements Initiative. So this initiative is a term of council priority, and it's under the Transportation Mobility Strategic Objective. The initiative is to improve safety for all road users. There's 5 programs within this initiative for which funding was allocated through the strategic initiatives. So the first program I'm going to talk to is the Accessible Pedestrian Signals Program, as well as the Pedestrian Countdown Signal Program. So the deployment of these 2 programs is to enhance mobility and make our cities safer for all users of the roadway. And it ties into the Transportation System Management Action Plan that was approved by Council a few years back. The accessible pedestrian signals provide a sound when activated that indicate to pedestrians when and in which direction they can safely cross at a signalized intersections. These devices provide improved security for low or no vision pedestrians by providing them greater mobility. The pedestrian countdown signals provide a visual countdown during the flashing don't walk interval, which displays how much time the pedestrian has to safely cross the intersection before the display changes. So priority is given to locations that do not require civil construction work and that are near schools or senior centers. The goal is to maximize the number of locations addressed within the program's yearly available funding envelope. The next program is the Pedestrian Safety Evaluation Program. This is a process that combines traffic engineering with public engagement for prioritizing and implementing pedestrian-related road safety improvements. This program reviews locations from a risk perspective to identify countermeasures to mitigate those risks. So these measures would include the installation of narrowing of crosswalks, potential smart channels to reduce pedestrian crossing distance, or other geometric features that would improve the pedestrian environment at the intersection. Previously, we would use this program through reconstruction projects, as there was no funding available to undertake standalone projects. But with this program now funded through the SI, we're able to do minimum 1 location per year. So the two locations identified on the screen, Riverside and Bank, was identified last year. This is a project we're working on with the NCC, and this is on the south side of the Bank Street Bridge, and the plan here is to actually extend the pathway under the bridge, similar to what we see on the north side of the bridge. What this means is pedestrians that are going along, using the pathways along, and cyclists as well, Riverside, won't have to come up to the intersection to cross the street. They'll be able to go under the bridge. The 2016 location, Churchill and Richmond, this location has been identified to provide more pedestrian space and visibility at the intersection with the numbers of pedestrians there. So we're looking at potentially widening the sidewalks as well as doing some pavement marking adjustments. The Temporary Traffic Calming Measures Program is a new program to help address speeding concerns. This program was based on a pilot project that we did over the last few years. It allows councillors to work with staff to develop plans to help address speeding issues with temporary measures. So $40,000 is allocated per ward, and we work with councillors to identify those measures that feel that would help with the community concerns of speeding in their ward. So these measures, what they don't include is permanent traffic calming. So, for example, speed humps, narrowing chicanes. And the concept here is if there's existing programs in the city to deal with those things, those will be dealt through those programs. The other example is the installation of multi-way stop or speed limit signs. We have warrants and criteria, and so we would follow those programs. What is included in the program includes speed display boards, painting of speed limits on roads, flexible centerline signage, other signage. It takes up, depending on the initiative and the measures, it can take up to 8 weeks to implement these measures from the time we get concurrence with the councillor on the plan, as well as then procuring the material and installing the materials. We continue to research and try new forms of temporary measures, so this list is what we do today, but it's not to say that we may add more based on what we see out there. So the speed boards and community signage can be installed year-round, providing there's an existing pole mounted on the sign. If there's new poles needed to be installed, then we're looking at waiting until the spring if anything's done after November 15th. So I should have mentioned, and brackets is sort of when, sort of the last date we can order the materials to ensure we can install that year. If not, we'd have to wait till the following year. Planters on local streets can be installed up and into the fall depending on when the snow arrives. There are some planters that we leave, depending on the locations, we can leave all year round, so those would be exempt, assuming we have space on the road during the winter. So the next slide just shows some pictures of locations we've installed over the last year. So the cost, the $40,000, what it covers is the equipment purchase, the replacement of damaged or stolen items, the installation of the measures, as well with the speed boards, the permanent ones. We have the ability to use a cloud service to see in real time what the speeds are, and it allows the councillors to download that information. So there's a communications cost to that. So if a councillor decides to go on that route, then there would be those costs as well. We also acknowledge that there's fewer opportunities in rural areas to install temporary traffic calming due to roadway types as well as the reduced number of school zones and residential areas. So this program also allows to address minor deficiencies along any rural cross-section road. So for example, if in a rural location where we have a roadway widths are narrow and shoulders are in gravel or asphalt that aren't in great shape, it may be necessary to complete minor shoulder paving in order to facilitate the installation of a cycling safety signage. So there has to be a sign or something tied to that modification. It's just to enhance the safety, especially on routes where you have high cycle usages and things like that. So we'll work to address these deficiencies under the program, and we'll work with the councillors case by case to identify what measures would be potentially done. So in 2015, there were, out of the 23 wards, 20 wards installed some sort of temporary measure. So the cost range, or the expenditures range from $0 to $27,000. So there was 3 wards where there was $0 spent. It's not that there weren't measures identified, but it was later in the year. It was measures that we wouldn't put in until next year, so, or I guess in 2016. So those will be installed this spring, and funds will be depleted from last year's budget. So we've been meeting with councillors over the last few weeks, and we still have some meetings to go to develop the work plan for 2016. And the plan is come spring, when the snow's gone and our crews are out painting and doing like that, we'll be out there making this a priority to get done. So the Safe Roads Ottawa program is a program that's a partnership between Ottawa Fire, paramedics, Ottawa Police, Public Health, and Public Works. We're committed to preventing or eliminating road deaths or serious injuries for all people in the City of Ottawa. So through this strategic initiative, we're going to develop 12 new campaigns between 2016 and 2018 to include a more robust awareness campaign and outreach activities based on the focus areas. So in 2016, a couple of examples is the pedestrian safety. So one of the things we observed when we were analyzing the data with regards to pedestrian and vehicle collisions is that about 24% of those collisions occur at intersections where the pedestrian had the right of way and the vehicle failed to yield. So we'll be developing an awareness campaign to make people aware of this issue and try to reduce these number of collisions. Similarly, when you looked at the top 10 collisions that we just released a few weeks ago, at those 10 locations we observed that between 50 and 90% of the collisions were rear-end collisions, which is talking about congestion. And so we're going to do an awareness campaign tied to that to see if we can try to reduce those numbers as well. It's just telling people to take their time, don't rush, and things like that. We'll also be doing a helmet cycling safety campaign later this year. So the red light camera program, currently we have 34 red light cameras, and each location has a camera at that installation. It's administered by a third-party provider. We lease these cameras from that provider. The current contract expires in 2016, and we're working with other municipalities. And the good news is we have the same provider after a competitive selection process moving forward 2017 and on. So the plan is basically to finalize the contract early this year, and then install 20 red light cameras by the end of 2018. In 2016, we'll be installing 5 new cameras at the locations noted above. And like I said, the remaining 15 cameras will be installed in 2017 and 2018. So we're selecting sites based on the occurrence of collisions that could be prevented with the use of the red light cameras. And these are the type of collisions, the ones where you have right-angle collisions, which are the ones that create the most serious injuries and result in death. So our criteria we use is looking at locations with 9 or more of these type of collisions over 3 years. And then we take it from there. Now, it should be noted that there's some locations, because of physical, either the buildings being right next to the road or things like that, we can't physically install the camera, so we would go to the next one on the list. So in summary, these programs, the Traffic, Pedestrian, and Road Safety Enhancement Initiative, his goal is to improve road safety for all road users. We'll be providing an update to Council through the City's Balanced Scorecard, so once midterm as well as the end of term of Council. So at this point, we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Phil. I'd like to start off by a couple of comments. First of all, I'd like to thank you for your work with Deputy Chief Keeley. One of the initiatives that came up during budget was a more target use of speed and traffic data and partnering up with the police, and I understand you've had a number of meetings in that regard and you're moving forward on that initiative so we can give more target enforcement for our residents, so appreciate your work on that. The other piece that I wanted to mention is all the councillors should have got one of these community-based toolkits for road safety campaigns, which is an initiative of Safer Roads Ottawa, along with the CAA and TURF, which is the Traffic Injury Research Foundation. And that is a really handy little box of tools that you can use in working with your community groups and determining how you want to go ahead and promote road safety. I just had a couple of questions, and I'm sure some of my colleagues will have as well. You had talked about some of the differences in terms of rural areas and work that may be done that wasn't, I guess, first thought of when we came forward with this initiative of the $40,000. Is there anything in the more suburban and urban cores, for example, around the installation of PXOs, which we're going to do, which would also fall out of sort of the normal course of what we've been talking about over the last little while?
Yeah, so that's a good example where we came to a committee last fall, talked about the PXO program and the rollout of locations. We have a certain amount of budget, so we've committed to try to do 2 locations per ward. Now, if there's some councillors that want to have other locations installed in advance of what had been planned over the next 2-3 years, we'd be able to use some of those funds to through this program to bring those forward. Now, it'd have to be locations that meet the criteria. So again, it ties into what I talked about with the multi-way stops and and those things. We're not going to install these if they don't meet the criteria, but if they do, and councillor wants to use some of this money to install it at these locations, we could look at that. So that would be installing the sign, looking at depressing curbs and things like that with regards to sidewalks, and potentially putting up some lighting if required.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions? Councillor McKenney.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this. I've also worked closely with Safer Roads Ottawa around some of the with some of the community around some of the measures that people can take and residents can take around safety measures, and that's been invaluable for sure, as has been the additional funding that we have for the temporary traffic calming. Another measure that makes intersections exponentially safer, actually, is both the automatic pedestrian signal, and we've talked about this before, and the advanced pedestrian signal coupled with a no right turn on red, so that, when you have a busy intersection, and whether it's a wide intersection or one that's just very busy with a lot of pedestrians, it allows traffic to stay stopped. It allows pedestrians to get that extra 4 or 5 seconds, before traffic moves. So I wonder, as part of your rollout here, is that something that you're looking at, and how can we, or should I be asking you for maybe a report back on what intersections we could look at, at least in the downtown, where you do have large numbers of pedestrians, where we could put those measures in place?
Yeah, so that's something that we do today, and the way it works today is if there's a request for an intersection. I know we worked at Preston and Somerset as an example, where there's a lot of pedestrians and that. So we'll take a look at that. We do a conflict study to determine if there's conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles, and if there is, then we would put the leading advance, similar with the no right turn on red. So it's basically location by location, so we'd be more than happy to work with you, and if you've identified locations. When you get into the downtown core, there's so many pedestrians that usually we don't have those conflicts, because people know, like when you're walking down Albert Street or Slater Street, the number of pedestrians actually makes it safer, because they're there in droves to cross the street. So there probably wouldn't be an advantage. We also want to be cognizant that if we start installing the no right turns everywhere, then you might likely get more disrespect at more of the intersections, which then could be problematic where you actually want it to be effective. So it's sort of trying to find that balance. But if there's specific locations, we can work with your office to identify those and do some reviews to determine if it makes sense to do those there.
Yeah, I'm thinking of locations where there are a lot of kids crossing, getting to schools. Somerset and Preston was a perfect example. It made that crossing much safer for the large number of kids getting to school in the morning. And seniors, obviously, we have a couple of intersections, and we've gone out and taken a look, at a couple of those where they do need a few extra seconds just to get started before the turning starts. So whether you couple it with a no right turn or it's just an advanced pedestrian signal. So, and I just wonder also if you could give us an idea of what it would take to for staff to set goals in terms of how we would move towards zero fatalities on our streets. Edmonton has done it. They have a Vision Zero policy. And as far as I can tell, we do a lot of what they do, but what we don't have, we've not set specific goals for the number of fatalities year over year that we want to prevent, and a number that will eventually take us to zero.
Yeah, the challenge with goals, especially with fatalities, is that, our goal is and that goes to the Safe Roads Ottawa Vision Zero, where we don't want to see any fatalities and serious injuries. But to target specific numbers, that can be a challenge because it's, fatalities and serious collisions are random events. And although we can do all the awareness that we want and that we do to try to make people understand, and we do that through engineering and enforcement, you can't really say that, because you've done all these things, that you're not going to have any fatalities. So, and it's interesting, prior to this Safe Roads Ottawa, we did have a goal of reducing collisions by, I think it was 20% at the time, and we weren't reaching those goals. So we went to a more holistic approach with regards to trying to see the trends go down, and we're starting to see those with regards to, the 2014 data showed that pedestrian collisions were down, cycling collisions were down, and so putting all those things together. So we are looking at doing a potential refresh of the Safe Roads Ottawa, where we identify goals such as, like we do with the SI, we'll do campaigns with regards to that. But to put a hard target number to say that, in 2020 we're going to have 0 fatalities, I just don't know if we could actually, it's actually something is reachable at this point. It'd be something that we would want to occur because one fatality is too many. But to put something specific, a number down there, I would just be concerned that, come 2020 and that doesn't occur, then it may be seen as a failure when, in fact, we've been doing a lot of work to progress things so that we do things. So I think the things that we're doing now, we're focusing on all the vulnerable users and trying to see that. And we're starting to see, over time, that we're starting to see those type of reductions.
Well, I do think that fatalities on our roads are not inevitable. I think that we can create all of the circumstances, whether it's how we design our roads, how we design our intersections. It does include things like, safer, more complete streets, that sort of thing. I just want to, I guess there is a difference between reaching for 0 and actually having that goal of 0. So I'll be watching closely what happens in other municipalities that have a Vision 0 policy. And if in fact, cities like Edmonton can do it, then I think that we can as well. I think that we have to, and that's for all users of our roads. That's for pedestrians, cyclists, transit users, drivers. I think that it's incumbent upon us to continue to move towards 0, but also to not to accept that road fatalities are inevitable. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure staff said they accept fatalities. I think what Phil said was one fatality is too many. I think what you're suggesting is that there's a lot of factors we can't control for, like drunk driving, speeding, those sorts of things you can enforce, but you can't necessarily control. Councillor Caudry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just coming back to a couple of questions on the PXOs. Existing traffic circles, will they be automatically receiving the PXOs, or again they'll have to go through the study in order to put the PXOs?
The existing single lane will be getting PXOs this June. The multi-lane, because of the cost, it'll be more of a staged approach, because there we have to put overhead signs and it gets more costly with the lights. So we'll be doing those in a stage. But all single lane roundabouts will have the PXOs this June.
Okay, coming back to the multi-lane traffic circles or roundabouts, from an accessibility point of view, currently they do pose a problem for people with devices. I understand the cost factor. Any idea in terms of time frame how much further they're behind than the single lane roundabouts?
We're probably hopefully a year or two. We haven't gone out and gone to tender with these devices. These are new, so we've estimated what costs are. If the costs come below what we're estimating, then we'll have the opportunity to do 2 more. Now, any new roundabouts that are under construction would get the treatment, and they would be installed right away. It's more the retrofit of existing. I think we've got about 9 or 10 multi-lane roundabouts in the city. It's just we want to ensure that they're done safely and that there's no issues with that. So.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, coming back to in terms of the intersections, with the new ministry law that was passed, the crossing of the pedestrian, for example, and the law says that you cannot drive into the intersection until the pedestrian has crossed all the way. Does that apply to traffic circles also? Because usually the traffic circle is divided by a median.
Well, the traffic circle, there's a center island, like the splitter island, the median, so basically it'd be the crossing that the pedestrian is doing from, say, the side of the road to that splitter island. When they've got to there, then it's a new crossing, so cars that, where pedestrians just passed would be able to proceed, and then cars in the other direction would have to stop and let the pedestrian cross, and then when they got out of the crosswalk, then they could proceed. And what we find at roundabouts today is that, you know, it's probably 50-60% of the people stop for pedestrians today, so it's more of a education program, and we'll be rolling that out as part of this rollout to let people that all of the cars have to stop. But again, it's going to be working with our communications group and residents and yourselves too to get that word out, to let people know the changes in the law, because it is a big change compared to what we had previously, which was nothing. So on that perspective.
In terms of, and I'm pretty sure that I've asked you this question in previous meetings about the existing crosswalks that are, you know, currently not operating as crosswalks. How are they going to be treated in terms of the new PXOs, or will they be treated differently?
The past crosswalks that were removed back at amalgamation, they'll be reinstated with the proper signage.
Not a PXO, just
it'll be a PXO. Yeah, it'll be most likely just a sign. And there's three types of PXOs. There's the one with the sign, and those would be probably used there because they were more on local collectors and things like that. Where we get into the flashing lights is more of the higher volumes roadways.
Thank you. And just one final question. In terms of the red light cameras, and I see the intersection in your presentation that are slated for in the future, is there any consideration being given to red light cameras to be used in suburban areas where there are concerns like speeding and, you know, traffic violations? So maybe look at one or two of these red light cameras as mobile that could be deployed in other areas. Is that being looked at all?
Well, we don't use mobile red light cameras. There's specifications that are required with regards to how they're installed. We have to put loops or detectors in the road. So mobile isn't an option, but we're looking at the whole city, and it's based on the number of right-angle collisions that we're seeing, because those are the most serious type of collisions. We don't really want to put a red light camera where those collisions aren't occurring, because what we have also seen is that you potentially get an increase in rear-end collisions, but the severity of those are a lot less. So we wouldn't want to put it at an intersection where there was no right-angle collision problem, and all of a sudden we put a red light camera in, and we start to see increase in rear-end collisions. So it's trying to find that balance. Like I think on the list today, one was out in Orleans that will be installed this year. Again, those are the top 5, and then we're going to be moving down our list and identifying others. So if there's specific locations that you're thinking of with regards to locations, we can put that on the list and do an evaluation to determine if that would meet the criteria to install a camera. Because at the end of the day, it's trying to eliminate that unsafe movement.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Chair, if you would permit me to just add my thanks to not only Mr. Landry and his group, but also to Mr. Wilkinson with the Safer Roads Ottawa and their partners. I think they're doing a great job behind the scenes. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Chernyshenko.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this report. It frequently comes up, probably for all of us, that we have residents who believe that people are driving too fast on their street, or, quote, everybody's driving too fast, and it's a perception. I suppose we all have it, particularly on smaller residential streets. Vehicles appear to be moving faster, and often when we actually do the data, do the monitoring, we find that speeds are lower than people believe them to be. I'm wondering to what degree our ability, the money at our disposal to do those somewhat minor safety measures within our own wards rely on data, and what role residents might play in reporting what they believe to be a problem so that we can study it.
So when we identify locations, so and just the list that when we come and meet with you, we've talked to our specialists that deal with all the complaints to identify roads, and you get complaints as well. So if we've got data for that area, we can share that with you and then we can have a discussion as to, well, there's really a speeding issue or there's no speeding issue. With regards, so we do that, and we also will collect data for the first time with regards to when we install it to see if the measure's been effective. Because the other thing is, we may all of a sudden, and we saw that in one of our pilots where we had a quite wide roadway, we put in the measure and it didn't really change anything, and it was because we feel that there was that friction or that feeling of a narrow road wasn't there because the road was wide. So the following year we actually put some posts on the side of the road to create that sort of narrowing, and it helped a bit more. So we would work with you to identify those locations. With regards to residents, I mean, they're more than, if they want to call us and identify locations or maybe working through your office. I know, I think it's Councillor Wilkinson's asked folks to let them know what the issue, where the problem areas are, and then we'll look at that list, and if we've got data, we can work with them to identify those locations.
Mm-hmm. I never want to be dismissive of a resident's complaint. They're scared or worried because of what they observe or perceive, but at the same time, we can't just be reflexive, as staff know, and we know as councillors, to just rush out and put in something because somebody thought that it was a problem. So that's important. Is there a role, then you indicate that residents, we do encourage then, if someone really believes there's a problem, that reporting it, whether to the councillor or through the councillor or directly through 311, that they note what they've been observing. That's actually a recommended behavior for people so that we're aware of a possible problem?
Yeah, I mean, if people, like we have today, if people have speeding concerns, they can they let us know. We'll go out, we'll review if there is. We also work with the Ottawa Police, like Councillor Eagle I mentioned at the start of the meeting. We've been working with them to be more proactive with regards to enforcement and focusing them on areas where there's actually problems. That from a safety perspective. So there's all these tools that we can do to identify that. And we also work with the residents. So if you're on a local street and where there's parking allowed and we see there's no parking on the street, we'll suggest, well, maybe you want to park some cars on the road to create that friction and things like that. So to try to do things to reduce those speeds. And we'll also explain to people, if someone's staying on a local residential street with a car going 40 kilometers an hour, we'll feel that the car is going a lot faster than if they're on a major collector or a wider road where they're going at that same speed. So it's, again, just an education. And that's where the speed boards help. And we do also have 10 speed boards that we rotate throughout the city. So we can deploy those, and we do that as well on those streets, so that there's an awareness from the residents' perspective to say, what, I just saw that car, I thought it was going 55, and the data actually showed it was only going 40. So that they get an awareness of what it feels like when a car is going at a certain speed. So we can work with the councillors and the residents from that perspective as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, and that's really behind. I'm one of many councillors who have not spent a lot yet, both because of it came towards the end of a year, but also we want to be sure that we're using the right tool for the job and actually are identifying priorities as opposed to a perceived problem. That was a good segue into, you mentioned speed boards and perception between residential streets and a larger, faster posted one. We continue to have, in my ward, the biggest problems are approaching the Bank Street Bridge, up and over it, between Old Ottawa South and the Glebe, and similarly leaving the Glebe into Old Ottawa South on Bronson. By far the largest number of accidents are there, reported red light running, etc. And we know that on the Bank, for example, when we posted a 40-kilometer-an-hour limit, I have no reason to believe or proof that that's working at all. Quite simply, it's a wide road. If you are driving 40, you feel like you're absolutely crawling, and yet we do have problems with speed there. What I'm wondering about is speed boards. Are they effective? That's the kind of location where going up and over that bridge with bad visibility, often well above the speed limit, would a board work on a 2-lane per side on a 4-lane road like that, or is it really restricted to 1 lane only to be effective?
No, I think 2-lane. We've got speed boards. I know there's one on Walkley Road down near Riverside. There's some in other areas, but no, they're effective too. It's more of an awareness to make people realize the speed they're going at. The challenge is a lot of people, most people drive at the speed they feel comfortable at, and in that section of Bank Street, people don't feel uncomfortable driving at 45, 50, 55. When you get further north, where the road narrows and also the buildings are right next, and the cars are parked on the street, it's not comfortable driving at those speeds. So the speed boards are just there to provide that awareness, and the data that we've collected before and after show that there is a reduction in operating speeds when the boards are displayed, and we've seen that for 2-lane roadways or 4-lane roadways.
That's certainly my sense, and I know it from when I'm driving myself in other cities, provinces, states, that sense of, oh, I had no idea I was driving 57 rather than 50 or higher. And so I find those boards very effective where, you've got a flashing board warning you when you're going way above it, smiley face. These are subtle little things when you're under it. I've seen various ways of sort of psychological symbols for people. The smiley face, thank you for driving the speed limit. The frown when you're over, flashing when you're way over. I actually think those are going to be more effective than just slapping up a whole bunch of 40s that, as you say, the road conditions, people, even if they aren't consciously going over the limit, they think they're respecting the limit and they're not. So I'm glad we have that tool at our disposal, and I'll work with you to see how particularly the Bronson and Bank ones are ones where we can use a speed board more effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kakish.
Thank you, Chair. On the APS and the PCS, you mentioned that you're focusing on the intersections or locations where there doesn't need to be a lot of civil work. Is there a working document that you can continue to update us in terms of those locations or ones that you're looking at, and once they are completed that you can pass to members?
Yeah, we can provide you a list of locations for your ward as well as citywide.
Okay. Thank you for that. My other question was on the traffic calming measures in the budget. I was surprised to see that a good chunk of the money for the majority of us hasn't been spent, and I just want to think Councillor Chernushenko may have touched on this briefly, but in terms of is it a resource issue, or and get your thoughts in general about this program and rolling it into future years versus, say, putting it towards another pot of money. I've been trying to get a traffic signal at Jockville and Gulf Links for a long time now, and it keeps getting pushed back. So I'm just wondering if we're spending half of this budget, should we carry it over to future years, or should we pull it in somewhere where perhaps we need those resources?
Well, I guess it'll be up to each councillor to decide if they want to use most of it in years. I mean, you're going to get $40,000 per year. I think the challenge for last year is because the program really only started, it was approved in July, and we had to hire, we have 2 staff now that are dedicated full-time. We got them on board late August. And so there was measures that were identified that really, like the flex posts, we take them out early November, so there's really no point in installing them for 4 or 5 weeks. So some of those, we've got those on our list to do, and they'll be installed this spring, and then that number from the 2015 will go up higher. I mean, at the end of the day, this program, like I mentioned earlier, it's not meant to, you won't be able to save it all and then put a traffic light somewhere, because we do have a program that deals with that kind of things, as well as the cost of traffic signals vary from $150,000 to $200,000, so there wouldn't be enough money anyway to deal with that. So I think it's based on what the priorities are for that councillor, where the issues are, and that's where we want to work with you. We can identify and through our meetings with you is to talk about these is what we're hearing from residents, and then you're hearing the same thing, and then trying to find. I know some councillors are using, I don't know, say 75, 80% of their dollars, and they're keeping a bit just so that that's part of the plan, but that there's a bit so that something comes up in the middle of summer where all of a sudden something that we hadn't thought of or had seen in the past, they can actually go in and use some dollars to implement something quite quickly versus waiting until the following year. So it's basically case by case, but we'll work with you to identify those and ensure that those things get implemented.
Yeah, and to be clear, I think the program's really working well, and we utilize it in the problematic areas, as I'm sure many of my colleagues, the number one complaint we get is traffic, but I'm just wondering if there's, surprised to see that only half of it was utilized by the majority of us. I'm just wondering if there's something in the back that we're not seeing, or if it's just that's the demand and supply that's out there.
Yeah, I would expect to see by come July, August this year, you'll see that if not all, the money from 2015, and a lot of the money, based on what I'm seeing with regards to meetings that we're having with councillors and items they want to bring forward to implement, that a lot of that money will get spent.
Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Cash, I think part of it also was last year was really half year in terms of the rollout, and I think that was part of it. I know, for example, I've got some projects that I didn't want to get done because I thought it was going to be snowier. For example, painting the road, and I wanted to get the most out of it, so I put those off until the spring. And the other is like just asking questions. I mean, for example, one of the things that I found out that I could purchase with this was a radar gun, speed radar gun, that I could go out to communities with. So I think it's a question of us getting used to what's there. I think Phil is probably right. We're going to see all that money spent this year. I think it's a good resource. It's available, and I certainly know in my ward there's a lot of uptake. I can't speak to the councillors that have not used any of the money yet. They would have to explain for themselves why that is, and it may be, as Phil points out, in a lot of the cases, there are jobs in the queue that they decide to put off until this year, but I think everybody should be using it and using it as much as you can, helping to address those issues. So I think Phil's right. The uptake in 2016 will be much bigger. We'll have the full calendar year, whereas before we only kicked in mid-year last time. Councillor Manette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you have a timeline for the proposed installation of the red light cameras?
For 2015, we're probably looking at the fall. At this point, we're in the process of getting the supplier or the contractor on board, and once that gets done, then we'll meet with them specific to these locations, and so probably September, October.
September, October, and all of them, the 5 that you have listed, will be installed in that time frame?
It should be in that time frame, yeah.
And will they be permanent cameras, or are you going to do like it's been done in the past, rotating them from area to area?
No, they're permanent cameras. They'll be there all the time, yeah.
Some areas, the older areas that you've had red light cameras in the past, have been rotating. Will they be changed to permanent ones also, or?
They were changed a couple of years ago, so every location now, we don't rotate anymore, every location's got a camera.
Tent line is permanent now?
Yep.
Okay, good. What criteria was undertaken to choose the locations that you've chosen?
So it was based on the number of right-angle collisions, because that's really the type of collision we're trying to prevent with the red light cameras. So we looked at if a location had 9 collisions or more over a 3-year period, then that would be put on the list. So those locations that I talked about today, as well as the other ones that we're looking at for future years, will have met that criteria. At least we've gone through that list. If at the end of the day we go through the list and there's still cameras available, then we'll go down to 8 and so forth and so on.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Can we receive this report? Okay. The next item is item number 6, the airport parking directional signs report. We do not have a presentation here, but we have a delegation through Krista Keeley, the Vice President of Communications and Public Affairs at the Airport Authority, and you all should have received email correspondence circulated by the clerk's office from Park and Fly dated the 28th of January 2016, which was in support of the staff recommendation. Good morning, Ms. Keeley. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, councillors and Chair Eglai. My name is Krista Keeley, and I'm the Vice President of Communications and Public Affairs for the Ottawa International Airport Authority. Thank you for providing the opportunity to address the committee with respect to Agenda Item 6, Airport Directional Signs. I'm joined by colleagues Joel Tkach, who is Vice President of Business Development and Marketing, and Alex Stekiafontis, who's Manager, Airport Planning and Municipal Affairs. The Airport Authority was established in 1997 as a not-for-profit organization without share capital that operates under a long-term ground lease with Transport Canada. The organization receives no subsidies or financial assistance from government. It is governed by a 14-member community-based board of directors, and its mandate is to manage and develop airport facilities and lands in support of the economic growth of the National Capital Region. The authority is required to reinvest any surplus earnings back into its operation to support continued growth and to keep airline fees reasonable, all with the goal of attracting new routes and flights for the benefit of our community. The airport is a significant contributor to the economy of this region, including more than $2.2 billion of total output each year, 5,000 direct jobs, and more than 10,000 in total employment. We pay over $247 million in taxes to various levels of government, including nearly $5 million in payments in lieu of taxes to the City of Ottawa. And the airport invests nearly $30 million in capital each year. In 2012, the Authority and the City of Ottawa signed a shared vision for Ottawa's economic development with unanimous approval by City Council. The intent of the agreement was to establish a common vision and set of objectives for working together towards action that optimizes contributions to economic development and employment. So why are we here today? On March 25, 2015, a notice of motion amending the Signs on City Roads bylaw was presented at Council, which directed city staff and resources to develop a signage program which, among other things, approved the installation of 7 temporary directional signs for Park and Fly. You may not be aware that Park and Fly is a for-profit enterprise that is wholly owned by Chung Kong Holdings and Chung Kong Infrastructure Holdings Limited, both Hong Kong-based companies. As such, Park and Fly does not have the same levels of responsibility and commitment to the community that the Authority does, nor do they have the same economic impact given that their revenues are not invested here. We would like to dispel any lingering confusion regarding the relationship between the Airport Authority and Park and Fly. They are not affiliated. They are not located on airport land, and they're not a tenant. Section 106 of the Municipal Act forbids cities from giving a bonus to a commercial enterprise, which includes giving or lending any property of a municipality. Contrary to the Act, the motion singled out one for-profit entity, giving them a distinct advantage over the airport and other private airport parking providers that are not located close enough to the airport to benefit from inclusion. It is our understanding that the motion was proposed due to possible concerns about the impact on nearby residential roads and local neighborhoods after Park and Fly signs were removed. However, Councillor Brockington conceded that his office has received no such complaints. Further, the City staff report indicates that complaints submitted by Park and Fly don't actually pertain to issues finding that business, but rather difficulty finding the airport. The Authority, however, has documented proof of confusion from passengers who have had trouble finding the airport, which has led us to submit 7 recent directional signage complaints to the City to have signage improvements made. The City's proposed signage plan will not improve the situation and will in fact cause greater confusion by taking drivers off the Airport Parkway onto an already congested Hunt Club Road and straight to Park and Fly, including those who have no intention of using their service but who simply want to get to the airport. It will also set a dangerous precedent for any business that can afford to advertise on city assets. In our view, this would cause unnecessary visual pollution throughout the city. The question of our airport welcome sign, as included in the motion, is misplaced. We have always asserted that the welcome sign is considered a lawfully existing sign under Section 26 of the Signs on City Roads bylaw, and that it existed prior to the property being transferred from the NCC to the City. The Authority engaged with the City to document this status prior to making a significant investment in a new welcome sign, which we installed on our property just last week. In summary, this is a solution in search of a problem that does not exist. It offers a business benefit to one organization at the expense of Canada's capital airport's ability to deliver on its mandate, as well as other parking businesses, and is contradictory to our shared vision commitment. In our opinion, it is incumbent on Council to adhere to the existing bylaw as intended.
Thank you. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions for the delegation, but I have a question to staff arising out of, and it's to our legal. Mr. Nahas, the issue of Section 106 and bonusing was raised. Can you comment on that for committee?
Yes, Chair, we've looked into this, and it's legal department's opinion that this does not contravene Section 106 of the Municipal Act.
Does not contravene?
Does not.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Are there any questions for this delegation? Seeing none, thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions in general around the report? Councillor Deans.
Well, I just want to be clear that when...
sorry, Councillor Deans, you can take your seats. Yeah, thank you.
When Council made this decision back in March, that was the decision for the term of Council, and what's before this committee today is actually a discussion about the color of the signage, the names on the signage, the cost, but we're not today revisiting the decision that was made last March to go ahead with this program. Is that correct, Mr. Chair?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Are there any other, Councillor Kakish?
Mr. Nahas, can you elaborate on how this does not contravene Section 106?
In looking at the facts in question, the airport wayfinding signs, the planned signs that are going up, if we look at the report and the appendix that's shown there in document 2 specifically shows that the planned signs that are going up are reflecting all three entities, the airport parking, as well as the park and fly, as well as auto park and jet. So all three entities are taking advantage of this program.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments, questions on the report or its recommendations? Okay, so carried. Carried. Thank you. So going back to the agenda, we have no in-camera items. Notice a motion for consideration at a subsequent meeting. I believe Councillor McKenney has a motion she'd like to read.
Thank you, Chair. This is in relation to the graffiti prevention program and the graffiti grant program that the city manages through the BIAs. So it's just to direct staff to report on the feasibility of establishing new funding allocation procedures for the BIA graffiti grant program that would enable the approved envelope of funds to be distributed based on graffiti incidents rather than by individual BIA area, and report back with a recommended approach at the earliest opportunity before the end of 2016.
Thank you very much. Are there any other notices of motion for consideration at a later meeting? Okay. Inquiries. I believe Councillor Chernyshenko has an inquiry.
Yes, thank you very much. While the success of all sorts of anti-smoking initiatives have made the indoor air quality much better in this city, what of course it has done is driven smokers outside of buildings, usually clustering at entranceways, which, as we all know, has led to a lot of cigarette butts being on the street. So my inquiry is about how the city currently manages cigarette butt waste. There are approximately 2.6 million cigarette butts generated in Ottawa each day. Estimate is that 65% 25% of those are littered, which translates into as much as 780,000 butts onto the ground every day. Acknowledging that the city currently relies on the participation of BIAs and their willingness to install cigarette butt receptacles, is there anything more that the city can be doing to decrease this waste in a cost-effective and sustainable way, and keeping in mind, of course, that those filters are doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is taking a lot of the toxins out of your smoke, which makes them extremely toxic, and they're finding their way into our waterways through rain and the actual object getting into our system. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chinchenko. No other business that I'm aware of, except I will say our next meeting on March the 2nd, 2016 is a very, very heavy agenda. So I would ask all committee members to book the day. I think at last count we have about 14 items on the agenda. So if you can keep that day clear, it would be appreciated. And adjournment? Oh. And the IPD is noted and is in the agenda received? Okay, adjournment? Thank you.